Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, welcome back. It's the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and today it's just me. Normally my co-host Austin Davidson is with me, but today we are doing a mock draft special episode. Austin has already done his episode, and I'll be doing mine right now. We're just going to be doing a quick look at our belief as far as who the Steelers are going to be drafting with their 7 selections, and then we're going to go through a first round, the entire first round, and go pick by pick, which obviously it's quite unlikely that I'll hit on many, if any of them. This is also the first time I've ever done this before, so just wanted to lay out the groundwork. First, we're going to start with the Pittsburgh Steelers mock draft, and I'll be posting this, of course, as soon as I finish recording. And with Austin's having been posted Monday, we should be all set and prepared for the draft coming up. So thank you for tuning in with us this offseason and kind of paying attention to what we've been looking at, and we hope it's done you some good as well. So let's get started. All right. So I guess before we get right into the draft, let's talk about the Steelers' biggest needs again. We've talked about it all offseason, but why don't we reiterate it? Sometimes as time passes, the way we view certain positions may change. A lot of that has to do with who's been signed, or trades, or retirements, things of that nature. So I think we came into the offseason thinking that inside linebacker and safety were probably the biggest needs, and I'd say that those are still true. They've been addressed with free agent signings, John Bostic and Morgan Burnett. I'd say those are still probably the highest positions of need. But as far as any other positions that need to be addressed in the draft, I would actually say edge rusher or outside linebacker and running back have become positions where the Steelers have to take at least one prospect here. I don't know when per se, but I know that these are positions that are either lacking depth or lacking star power right now, and they really need a little boost right now before the Steelers can be put over the top as far as talent-wise goes, or as far as depth purposes go, for winning a Super Bowl next year. So the top needs are inside linebacker, edge, safety, and running back. This is my opinion, of course. You can disagree with me and tell me why I'm wrong in the comments section below if you want. Next, I have second tier, which was a want, which is a position where I would like the Steelers to address this position, but if they don't, it's not the end of the world, but it's still something I think the Steelers should at least look into. They are wide receiver, tight end, and offensive line, preferably interior. So with the receiver group, the Steelers pretty much are a very top-heavy unit right now with Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Martavis Bryant. Behind them, they have Justin Hunter right now, and Darius Hayward-Bay. Hunter caught 3 passes last year. Hayward-Bay caught 1, and it was from Robert Golden, a safety, not a quarterback. So the Steelers are really lacking depth at the back end of the receiver position. At tight end, Jesse James is in the final year of his contract, and Vance McDonald didn't have a great season because he was injured most of last year. The third tight end position is definitely up for grabs, and as far as offensive line goes, the Steelers lost jack-of-all-trades Chris Hubbard. They have the linemen to replace him now in Matt Filer and Gerald Hawkins, but you'd like to see them add another guy, especially considering the fact that the Steelers went last year without drafting a lineman, and that's pretty rare, so I think it'd be pretty hard to expect them to pass up a lineman this year. And then the last tier is positions that the Steelers don't need. That is cornerback, defensive line, and specialists, and quarterback as well, of course. Now with the punter, I would prefer to see the Steelers bring in an undrafted free agent to compete with Jordan Berry, but they've already done that in Matt Weil, so it's unlikely the Steelers would address this, and they don't need to. Certainly no other specialists are needed. I think defensive line is really not needed. If you're getting someone, it's to compete with Daniel McCullers or L.T. Walton, the fifth or sixth defensive lineman on the roster. Those guys aren't going to play much, so it doesn't really matter in my opinion. Quarterback, the three guys are in place. Unless if one of those guys suddenly retires out of the blue, the Steelers don't need to replace any of them. Dobbs is clearly entrenched as a number 3, and Jones is clearly the number 2. And obviously you're not touching anything with Ben Roethlisberger right now. So quarterback is on that list, and cornerback is as well. Whereas last year I think the Steelers made the right choice in drafting 2 cornerbacks. I actually don't see the point in drafting one this year. There's only one player in my mind that could stand to be upgraded, and that's Cody Sensabaugh, who's mainly going to be a special teams player next year. So I don't really see the point in adding a cornerback. All right, so what prospects have been linked to the Steelers over the past few months? I've seen 4 players mocked in the first round early. Those players are Leighton Vander Esch and Rashaan Evans. Both of those, the first 2 are inside linebackers, the Steelers' highest position of need, and they're both pretty solid players. I'd honestly be happy with either. In recent weeks, though, it seems as though Vander Esch is going to be off the board before the Steelers get to pick at number 28. That's unfortunate because he's been compared a lot to TJ Watt as an inside linebacker instead, which, I mean, that would be fantastic, but it's looking like that will be unlikely. Evans is more likely to be on the board, so keep your name out for both of those guys. Next is running back Darius Geis from LSU. The Steelers really like him. It's quite obvious that they do. But the fact of the matter is the Steelers are in win-now mode, and if he gets drafted, unless if Bell gets released or something or gets injured, Geis isn't going to play much next year. So I'd be opposed to picking a running back in the first round for the sheer fact of what are they going to contribute to the team this year, because the Steelers are, in fact, in win-now mode. The last player I've seen is cornerback Jair Alexander, the cornerback from Louisville. I'm going to be completely honest here. I don't think this is a smart move that the Steelers draft a cornerback. I already talked about how I think it's not a position of need at all. Outside of specialists and quarterbacks, I think this could be the worst move the Steelers could make. Yeah, you could maybe perhaps find the number 1 cornerback you've been waiting for since Ike Taylor, but at the same time, think about it. You're still leaving the inside of the field completely wide open, and there's just no need. Like, you're going to kick Cody Sensabaugh off the roster for that, or maybe even Brian Allen. I just don't think it's worth a first-round pick for that. And what if he's not that good? Then you've wasted the pick there when you could have at least had an adequate guy at inside linebacker or somewhere else. I just think people think of the Steelers' poor pass defense in the second half of last year, and they like to pin that on the cornerbacks because the Steelers haven't been good in pass defense for the past few years and have gotten a bunch of defensive backs. But I don't think that the Steelers need to go out and get a cornerback. Excuse me. All right, another thing that should be addressed, should the Steelers trade up or down, and will they? Well, let's talk about it. They have history of doing both. It's not very extensive, especially when it comes to trading up. We're going to be talking mostly about the first round here. I'm not going to say the Steelers will or won't trade up in the middle or late rounds, because they do. But the last time the Steelers traded up in the first round was to grab Troy Polamalu, the safety from USC, likely going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, certainly a Hall of Famer, in 2003. They've never done it in the Kevin Colbert era besides then. And as far as trading down, they've only traded down in the first round once, and it was Colbert's first year in 2001. The Steelers have never traded out of the first round. So if the Steelers traded down, they wouldn't be trading out of the first round. That means going from pick 28 to somewhere from 29 to 32. That's not a very wide array there, and I wouldn't see the point of moving just a few picks back. So, to be honest with you, I don't see trading down happening in the first round. And trading up, I think this might be the year that it makes the most sense to do it, but the problem is, what do you have to pull the trigger with? You'd have to trade up probably right around the top 10 to get either Roquan Smith or Tremaine Edmonds, the real guys that could make a huge impact right away and look like superstar players. But are you really going to be able to get those guys? Are you really going to be able to jump in front of those teams and get into the top 10? What kind of picks and players would you have to give up for that? I just don't see it happening. I'd like to think this is the year the Steelers should make a run at trading up, but with only a couple of top-heavy guys in the unit, I don't know if it's worth trading up for Vander Esch for 10 picks as opposed to perhaps Evans or another player at 28 from 18 or something like that. Because then again, he might be on the board when the Steelers pick, so you're taking quite a gamble there. All right, let's get into the mock draft. So first round, I've mentioned his name already, inside linebacker Rashaan Evans at number 28 overall, the inside linebacker from Alabama. Look, he's got a lot of interesting qualities, and he checks a lot of traditional boxes that the Steelers like to have in their inside linebackers and first-round picks. It's the biggest position of the need, and he's at the position of need. He's athletic, he plays the run well, he's physical, and he's versatile enough to play in coverage at times. He seems like he would fit in well in Pittsburgh at a 3-4 defense to me. But obviously there's a few problems. One, the Steelers don't take Alabama players often. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Alabama players get worn down easily and quickly because of how physical it is in the SEC and how great these guys are. They always are out there to prove that they're the best. So they take a lot of pounding too. So there's that. The other is his groin injury, which could be part of the whole breaking down process. He suffered a pretty... It wasn't debilitating by any means of a groin injury, but he played with it all year, and he didn't run at his combine or his pro day. And that has some teams concerned now that we're approaching the halfway point of the NFL offseason. Like, is he going to be at full strength? Is this going to be a recurring kind of thing? And then last but not least, he didn't drop into coverage, and he's not as experienced in it as you'd like your inside linebacker to be, at least in Pittsburgh. So just keep your eye on that. But I think he makes the most sense here. The Steelers need an inside linebacker desperately, and I think he can at least fill the void somewhat that was left by the injury from Ryan Shazier. So I have Rashaan Evans, the first-round pick, at 28 overall. Second-round pick, 60th overall, I have safety Jesse Bates from Wake Forest. And it's funny, I looked at Evans earlier in the draft, and I actually looked at Bates too. I was not expecting to have Bates listed in my mock draft because he was actually one of the players I was least impressed with as far as the safety position goes. But the Steelers have undoubtedly showed interest in him. He just turned 21 2 months ago, and he's hailed as, if not the best, then one of the best safeties in the draft when it comes to coverage. He's really fast, and honestly, I don't think the Steelers have ever had a free safety type player that fast, especially now considering that Morgan Burnett was announced to be the starting free safety today. I think it makes more sense that Bates could come in as a coverage specialist and could be a guy that eventually takes Burnett's job in the future, just a guy that comes in and he doesn't have to be the guy on day one. He can learn under new coach Tom Bradley, and he'd be a nice, cool little toy for him. And he's got great ball skills that, the Steelers haven't had a great safety since Troy Polamalu retired. And I think this could be a chance to have a guy that can make a lot of big plays back there. So even though he's not the best in run support, he's not crazy physical, but at the same time, he could still hit. He can still play football. I think he'd be a welcome addition. So maybe in a year or two, he'd become an impact player. And yes, he's not at the same level of Minkah Fitzpatrick or Derwin James, but he could be a special teams contributor early on too. I think this would be a good pick as far as the idea goes that there'll be a limited player early on. Third round pick, I wanted to go defense again here, but rarely do the Steelers ever go, all offense or all defense in the first 3 or 4 picks. So I'm going to go with a running back in this third round, the 92nd overall pick, Royce Freeman. Austin looked at this kid, and he was actually his favorite running back. And after watching his tape and reading up about him a little bit, I think I understand why. So this is where I think the Steelers are going to start to create their by-committee approach for after Lev Bell leaves next year. They have a change of pace back in James Conner, a short yardage guy already. And this guy, Royce Freeman, could be the third down back or another change of pace back. He was very accomplished at Oregon, their all-time leading rusher. And he might not be the long-term answer at running back, but he's shown that he can carry the load. He can catch the ball. And I guess really the only concern here for me is durability. He suffered injuries his junior and senior season that kind of slowed him down. He didn't look as fast. But at the same time, he wouldn't play much at all this year behind Bell. That would give him a year to kind of heal up a bit and get a little faster, maybe a little more lean, and he'd be ready to either be the starter or one of the guys going into training camp the following year. So I think Freeman would make a lot of sense. Maybe I would prefer to see the Steelers take a running back as a third down specialist late, but I just don't see the Steelers doing it. And although I loved Akram Wadley from Iowa, I'd be very happy to get Royce Freeman, the guy Austin looked at from Oregon. I think he's a very good player, and I'd be very happy to have him in Pittsburgh as well. So keep your eyes out for him for the third-round pick. The Steelers do not have a fourth-round pick this year. They traded that away, and they, instead of 2 fifth-round picks, they have a early fifth-rounder from the San Francisco 49ers from the Vance McDonald trade. And here I'm going to go quite similar to what Austin had, and I'm going to have Durant Armstrong Jr., the edge rusher from Kansas. I was really torn here. It was down to him and, how do you say his name? Obadiah Akruwanka, I believe is how you say it, the guy from Oklahoma that Austin looked at. In the end, I decided to give the edge to the guy I looked at just because I thought he had a better upside as a pass rusher, and that being Armstrong. He didn't drop much in college, which obviously the Steelers love in their edge guys, but he also wouldn't be playing a ton in his first season, I would imagine. The drop in production we saw last season in college doesn't bother me a whole lot because of the change in the change in scheme, which affected that. I think he shows a lot of good raw talent, and I know we said the same thing about Bud Dupree, but he can ease his way into the system, and I really hope the Steelers just see him and they say, man, he'd be great at rushing the quarterback. Who cares about, coverage? Just let him worry about setting the edge and getting after the quarterback, or even at first just getting after the quarterback, and that's all I'd want, because I think if the Steelers turn him loose like that, he could be a really good weapon down the line. All right. 5th round, second pick, I have, with the 165th overall pick, I have the Steelers taking Cedric Wilson Jr., the son of former Pittsburgh Steeler and Super Bowl 40 champion Cedric Wilson Sr. Now, I honestly don't know if Wilson's going to be available this late in the draft, but let me tell you why it would be great if the Steelers did get him. He's more athletic, and he's faster than his father was, and he's bigger too. He was hailed as a tremendous worker in college by his coaches and teammates. He's a good route runner, and he knows how to come down with deep balls. He may not be a superstar kind of player, but he's a day 3 player because of the schools he played at, and he's flying a little under the radar, but I have a feeling he's going to soar a little bit just because of his name. But if the Steelers can manage to get him, I think he would be a fantastic depth option. He's only going to get better. Even if his upside is only as a number 2 or number 3 receiver, I think he can add quite a lot to a team. 26% of his targets in his college career, at least at Boise State, were passes thrown 25 yards or more down the field. I'm sure there's a little bit of Ben Roethlisberger that is really excited to know that if he ends up getting drafted. And, of course, it's the Steeler connection with his father. So, of course, I'd love to see his son play for the Steelers. That'd be really cool. The first time I would ever get to see a player that I was watching growing up in Cedric Wilson, I would get to see his son playing for the Steelers too. So that'd be pretty cool for me. Anyway, probably why I have him here too. I don't know if he'll be available, but nonetheless, I have Cedric Wilson Jr. from Boise State, the wide receiver, in the 5th round, the second 5th round pick, 165th overall. So much like the 4th round, the Steelers don't have a 6th round pick. Instead, they have 2 7th round picks. The first being pick 220 overall from the New York Giants. This is the first prospect that I select here that I haven't looked at, and neither is Austin. His name is Abdullah Anderson, a defensive tackle from Bucknell University, a small school. Small school defensive tackle. The Steelers like to take those types of players, and I think that he fits the bill. And I've seen, I think it's Bilal Nichols is how you say it. I think Austin had him in his mock draft. I've seen him mocked to the Steelers a lot, but I don't know if he'd be available in the 7th, so instead I'm going with Anderson. He's 6'4" and just under 300 pounds. He's very talented, and he has pretty good upside. But obviously he's a bit undersized. He's got to spend time in the weight room. So, again, his college competition is going to raise some red flags. So he's not a day one or day two guy. You're bringing him in as a flyer in the sense that maybe he could become something more. And with Daniel McCullers on the back end of that position group, you already know what he is. Give him the chance to battle it out with the younger guy, and maybe even if Anderson is on the practice squad for a year or so, maybe you give him the chance to unseat LT Walton or McCullers in the future. Just bring someone else in, get some new blood in there. I don't know if he'll be good or not, but I think it's a good idea to bolster the depth chart anyways. Final pick with the 7th round, 246th overall, I have the Steelers taking a local kid, Brendan Mahon of Penn State, a guard. Or is it Brendan Mann? I'm going to go Mahon, just for the sake of spelling it. But in any case, with the departure of offensive lineman Chris Hubbard and the fact the Steelers didn't draft a lineman last season, like I said before, I think it's far more likely the Steelers take one this year. But because their starters and immediate reserves are already filled in, the Steelers can afford to wait to draft a guy if they even want to draft one. And I think a local kid from Penn State, he fits the billing for a late target guy. And Mike Munchak likes to have these kinds of players on his team. He turns them into great players, a la Chris Hubbard, Alejandro Villanueva, so on and so forth. He just needs to work on his technique and get a little bit bigger in the weight room. He's probably going to be a practice squad player at first, but there's no shame in that. We've seen a lot of players go from practice squad to, starting caliber players. Maybe Mahon could be one of those. So that wraps up part 1 of this episode where we look at the Steelers mock draft, their full 7 rounds, and come back shortly, and I'll go over the entire round 1 selections for the 2018 NFL Draft. Thank you. Welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. It's John Keir, and let's kick off part 2, round 1 of the NFL Draft for 2018. Before we get started, let's just kick it off by talking about trades. So I actually think there's going to be a ton of trades in this draft, but because of the complexity of it, and again, the fact I've never done this before, I'm actually going to sit this one out, but I'll throw in a few items in there as in, I believe this team will trade at this point or something like that. Because I believe there's going to be, at the very minimum, 3 to 4 trades. I'd be shocked if there were any less than that. This seems like a draft where a lot of teams are going to be moving around. So, without further ado, let's get started. All right. Round 1, pick 1. For the second year in a row, it's the Cleveland Browns. Last year they picked Myles Garrett. This year, I believe they're going to take quarterback Sam Darnold from USC. Look, there's been a lot of talk about Josh Allen in recent weeks here, the quarterback from Wyoming. But the fact remains, Allen seems more like a long shot player with higher upside right now, and while that seems to make sense as something you'd want, in the long term, look at the Browns' track record. It's pretty obvious they need as much of a sure thing as possible. Darnold is the safest option here, and the Browns have to get a quarterback. They have to. So make sure it's the right one, get Darnold, and boom, just go from there. Pick 2. New York Giants, I think they take the best player available. It's Saquon Barkley, the running back from Penn State. A lot of talk about the Giants taking maybe Bradley Chubb or trading even or getting the quarterback of the future to succeed Eli Manning. I know they need a quarterback, but I think they still believe Eli Manning has a year or 2 left in him. I think they get the ultimate difference maker in Barkley this year, and they give Manning another year or 2 to try to do something with it. But it'll give the Giants their first resemblance of a running game that they've had since they won the Super Bowl pretty much, and even that year that wasn't even that good. So a step in the right direction for the Giants. Their neighbors, the New York Jets, with the 3rd pick in the overall draft after a trade with the Colts. They're going to do quite the Jets thing in picking Baker Mayfield, the quarterback from Oklahoma. Look, I know he seems like a pretty good player, and maybe he will be a great player, but he just seems like less of a sure thing to me than any of the other guys. And I don't care about his personality or whatever. I'm not sold on his ability as a long-term player in the NFL. but there's no doubting that he's an electric playmaker. And obviously, I haven't watched Baker Mayfield, as much in college as a lot of people have. So I could certainly be wrong about that. But at the same time, I don't think he's as good as the other quarterbacks. And, even though he's going to be drafted, he won't have to play right away, which is actually a big win for him. It can let him sit back for a year, maybe two, if it ends up being a while. And his electric playmaking ability could be a huge boom in New York, and I think it has the potential to be that, but still, I'm not a huge fan of that selection, but I just see the Jets making that move anyways. Round 1, pick 4, it's the Cleveland Browns again. After the Deshaun Watson trade last year, they picked up this pick, and this time they're also going to take, they're going to take the best player available. Just wanted to point out, I believe the Browns could also trade down from this position, but they're going to take Bradley Chubb, the defensive end from North Carolina State. They got Myles Garrett last year, and he played pretty well when he was healthy last year, and I think adding Bradley Chubb to the other side creates a formidable duo on the outside for the Browns that all of a sudden have a pretty sneaky good defense on their hands, or for other teams to have on their hands. So I think adding him makes the Browns a much better team. The 5th pick, the Denver Broncos, is another pick that I think that could be traded down with. I think they get their man here in Josh Allen, the quarterback from Wyoming. Case Keenum's the bridge quarterback, and everyone knows that. So the quarterback that gets drafted here doesn't have to play right away. And that's great because Allen is supposed to be the developmental guy, the guy that has the highest upside, but it's going to take the longest to get there. And that's okay. He doesn't have to play right away. So, boom, that's a big fit right there for Keenum, the Broncos, and Allen as well. So win-win-win. Round 1, pick 5, the Colts. With the Jets selection, take offensive guard Quentin Nelson from Notre Dame. Look, the Colts need just about everything. I think they start here by trying to, once again, protect their quarterback, whoever ends up being, whether it be Luck or Brissett, because they keep getting killed back there. Plain and simple. They need a guy that can protect him. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with the 7th pick, they take safety Derwin James from Florida State. Look, the Bucs had a terrible defense last year, and James is a versatile safety. I think he's a very smart addition here. I think he's the best safety in the draft, and I think he'd be a tremendous help to the Buccaneers defense that struggled last year. With the 8th pick in the draft, I think the Chicago Bears select Denzel Ward, the cornerback from Ohio State. Look, the Bears need someone talented to play on the outside because their cornerback position group has been decimated. Not as bad as their receiving group from a few years ago, but it's still not great. And Ward fits the billing that they need. With the 9th pick, I have the San Francisco 49ers taking the first inside linebacker in this draft, Tremaine Edmonds from Virginia Tech. Although I liked Roquan Smith a bit better, I think the 49ers need someone a little more versatile to replace Reuben Foster up the middle of their defense. They go with Edmonds because of that, and because of the fact that he's a little bit younger. He'll be on a young team and a young defense. He'd fit in a little better, I think. The Raiders respond by going with the other top inside linebacker, Roquan Smith, with the 10th pick. The Raiders' defense was plain awful last year. Let's boil it down to that. Roquan Smith was one of my favorite players coming out of the draft. I think he's fantastic, and I think he'd be a great player for any team, and I think John Gruden is going to see that. And his first pick since returning to the NFL, I think, will be a good one for Roquan Smith. The Miami Dolphins, another position here with the 11th pick, I think they could trade out of because of the way the position group is broken down. But I think it's more likely they take defensive tackle Vita Vea from Washington. The Dolphins desperately need defensive line help after cutting Ndamukong Suh earlier this offseason. Vea is the best interior defensive lineman on the board, and he fills a need. So I think this is a simple cut and dry selection here, nice and easy. The Buffalo Bills at pick number, I'm losing track here, 12. From the Cincinnati Bengals in the trade, they've picked their quarterback. The Bills finally get their man, Josh Rosen, the quarterback from UCLA. Couldn't say I was expecting that a few months ago, but they get the guy who's supposedly the most NFL-ready quarterback in the draft alongside Sam Darnold, and he looks like the guy who could finally lead the Bills back to consistent postseason prominence. The 13th pick, I have the Washington Redskins taking defensive tackle Deron Payne from Alabama. It seems like a good fit for the Redskins. He's a good run stopper, and the Redskins have struggled mightily in stopping the run the last few years. So I think this makes sense here. Green Bay Packers with the 14th pick take Micah Fitzpatrick, the safety from Alabama. He's not the best cover guy, and he's more of a linebacker hybrid, but he's athletic, a physical freak of nature, and he replaces Morgan Burnett pretty well in that case because that describes him pretty well as in addition to that. So I think that makes sense. So add Micah Fitzpatrick to the Green Bay Packers. With the 15th pick, I have the Arizona Cardinals selecting offensive tackle Mike McGlinchey from Notre Dame, the offensive tackle. The Cardinals, I don't think they like Mason Rudolph or Lamar Jackson enough to take them here. They could trade back, but I think they're going to try to get someone to better protect quarterback Sam Bradford, who has a long injury history list. With the 16th pick, I have the Baltimore Ravens going receiver heavy now by getting Calvin Ridley from Alabama. Despite adding Michael Crabtree and Willie Snead to the position, the Ravens remember all too well the struggles they went through on offense for Joe last season, as Joe Flacco had no one to throw to. So they add the best receiver in the draft to turn the receiver position in Baltimore from a position of weakness to a potential position of strength. I like that move there for them. The 17th pick, I have the Chargers picking inside linebacker Leighton Vander Esch. They're taking him because all the other players that they probably would have liked are already gone. And with the middle of their defense still needing an upgrade, I think they go with the smart pick and taking Vander Esch or deciding to trade down. Seattle Seahawks with the 18th pick are going to take cornerback Josh Jackson from Iowa. I think the Seahawks are going to try to replace Richard Sherman as a starting cornerback, and they'll get a young and talented guy in there, but they're going to, again, ignore the fact that Russell Wilson is running around for his life every game. And, it sucks for him, but I think the Seahawks are going to have to go cornerback here. All right, next pick, the 19th pick, the Dallas Cowboys select Courtland Sutton, the wide receiver from SMU. The combination of Dak Prescott's horrible sophomore season and Des Bryant being cut, the Dallas Cowboys are in deep need of a wide receiver, and Sutton is going to be a pick out of necessity. They gamble on him being an impact player for the future. We'll see if it pays off for him, but it's a position they have to draft at. 20th pick, the Detroit Lions are up. I think they take defensive end Marcus Davenport from UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio. The Lions need help rushing the passer, and Davenport would be a welcome addition, and a player that honestly instills fear in his opponents. So watch out for Davenport. The Bengals up now, who swapped their pick with the Bills, take offensive guard Will Hernandez from UTEP, University of Texas, El Paso. Andy Dalton was under siege last season, and despite whiffing on previous picks, the Bengals know that they have to improve their offensive line. So they add Hernandez to the mix to help try and remedy this issue they've had the last year or two. The Buffalo Bills pick again in a trade from the Chiefs. They pick up Isaiah Wynn, the guard from Georgia. With center Eric Wood retiring due to injury and Richie Incognito's status unknown, although likely to not be in Buffalo next year, the Bills are going to need an upgraded interior offensive line, and Wynn is a safe pick for the Bills to bolster the middle of their offensive line, I think. Next pick is the New England Patriots. I think they take offensive tackle Colton Miller. By the way, this pick comes from the Los Angeles Rams. Colton Miller from UCLA. Look, I wrestled with this for a while. I was thinking about Mason Rudolph, but let's be honest, the Patriots and Steelers are pretty much in the same situation. There's no way the Patriots are taking another guy right now. Brady will play next year, and they're going to need someone to replace tackle Nate Solder, so they get their man in Colton Miller to play the backside tackle position. Next up is the Carolina Panthers. I think they take running back Darius Geis, the running back from LSU. Even though they just added Christian McCaffrey last year, he's more of a versatile guy, a guy that can catch passes out of the backfield, a guy who can be split out wide. They need their new workhorse guy now that Jonathan Stewart's been cut. So I think Darius Geis is going to fit in perfectly for the Carolina Panthers there. Next pick is the Tennessee Titans. I think they go edge here. I think they'll pick up Harold Landry from Boston College. I really liked him, too, coming out of college, and I think he'll be a good pick for the Titans. who really struggled to rush the passer in crucial moments last year, especially in the playoffs, and I'm thinking specifically the Patriots game. Landry would upgrade this unit pretty well. With the 26th pick, the Atlanta Falcons are going to be taking defensive tackle Taven Bryan from Florida. I was thinking about Michigan's Maurice Hurst here, but I think Bryan is more likely to be a first-round pick, and I think he fits the bill better as a guy who gets on the field right away, and the Falcons are going to need someone with Dontari Poe having left. 27th pick, I have the Saints taking Hayden Hurst, the tight end from South Carolina, and I think the Saints, again, are in a mode similar to the Steelers. And I thought about them picking a receiver, but I think they don't need a tight end, but I think they'd really like to have a tight end that just creates mismatches. And even though he's a little older, working with Drew Brees for a little bit, he doesn't have to be the guy. I think it's going to be a nice combination there to have Hayden Hurst in Louisiana. Next pick is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I already talked about it. Rashaan Evans, the inside linebacker. I think he's the best player available that the Steelers need right there. He's close to it, if he isn't, and he fits the need well, so I think it makes sense to have Evans going to Pittsburgh at 28. 29th pick, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking quarterback Lamar Jackson. Yes, just a few months after they extended Blake Bortles, I think the Jaguars realized that if they had a better quarterback or a quarterback that was capable of more bigger plays, they could have beaten the Patriots in the AFC Championship game and maybe would have won the Super Bowl. They're not giving up on Bortles necessarily, but I think they're just getting an insurance plan in case Bortles' season last year was just a fluke, or if he is, as a matter of fact, just a really good player that finally came out this past postseason. But I think that Jackson is their guy for the future. And he doesn't have to play right away. He can just sit back and, the Jaguars can bide their time, see if they want to stick with Bortles, or if they do eventually want to go with Jackson in the future, the quarterback from Louisville. The Minnesota Vikings, with the 30th pick, take guard Connor Williams. And look, the kid from Texas, he'll fit in. The Vikings needed help on their offensive line, and they got to find someone to protect their new mediocre quarterback, Kirk Cousins, so I think they go with Connor Williams from Texas. That's all I have to say on the matter. The New England Patriots, with the 31st overall pick, take cornerback Jair Alexander from Louisville. They need a guy to replace Malcolm Butler on the outside of their defense, and I think Alexander gives them a guy who can make an impact right away. So I think he's a smart pick for the New England Patriots. And last but not least, I have the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions, taking safety Justin Reed from Stanford. The Eagles get a guy to help the back end of their defense, and yes, it was great last year, but the Eagles realize even in the Super Bowl winning effort, they did get torched. So I think they add an athletic guy in Stanford that checks all the boxes of the prototypical safety. So that concludes my first round mock draft and this mock draft episode. It's been a lot of fun, and I can't believe it's already over. We're less than 3 days now from the NFL draft. It's fast approaching, and boy, I can't wait for it to happen. I can't wait to see who the Steelers get, where all these trades going to come from. It's a wonderful time. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Do you have any questions about the show? Email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can find all those profiles through our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Check out our episodes on YouTube and SoundCloud. And, of course, you can always look us up, Stronger Than Steel Podcast, on any of the social media sites if you can't find us. Our Twitter username is @stronger_steel. For Facebook, it's @StrongerThanSteel Podcast, and for Instagram, it's @Stronger_Steel_NFL. All right, thank you so much for joining me today, and as always, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel Podcast.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.